control of the research institutions. And the way that they take control of the research institutions is the big corporations are always the ones that do the big research. You and I can't do the research in my garage. I know how difficult it is to do research. In the research that I'm trying to do in the ancient ruins of Southern Africa, in the many samples that I've taken, in the many fossils and rocks that I've collected, just to get scans done of these rocks, to get x-rays done, and high photon emission x-rays, proton emission x-rays that really penetrate deep into these fossils to show you exactly the internal structure. I can't afford that. I can't afford to have all the soil samples scanned if there's gold residue in there. Basic, simple research that I can't even do because it's so expensive. So you can imagine how the top level research institutes, the Medical Research Institute, the Genetics Institutes, the Stem Cell Research Institute, the technology researchers, and so forth. It's only the large corporations with the money that can afford those research institutions, and then they don't share the knowledge and information. Everything that comes out of those research institutions is their privilege, is their intellectual property. They only share what they want to and put out what they want to and keep the rest so they can control humanity and regain control over their area, their industry, and the products that they manufacture and design and distribute to the poor people and the unknowing schmucks out there who got no idea how much technology, knowledge, information, healthcare has been withheld from us. And it's these same research institutions that provide the research knowledge and information that gets put into the textbooks from pre-primary schools, whether it's history, whether it's literacy, whether it's language, or they plan the programming and the very early level propaganda and programming and mind control with how they now structure the content of our very early learning books and textbooks to the more advanced textbooks in medicine and science and engineering and technology and physics and science and so forth. So now you know the information in our textbooks only comes from the very large corporations that can afford these research institutions and the labs and the research labs. So by controlling the labs, controlling the educational institutions, you pretty much control the flow of knowledge and what goes in and what gets taught at schools and what does not get taught at schools. And you know by now that any teacher that strays, or lecturer at university that strays away from the textbook, teaching what's in the textbook, gets fired, loses their job. And you realize it's a draconian system that has been imposed on us. It's nothing to do with education and learning. It's all programming us and preparing us to be very obedient future labor force. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Take control of our educational material, as I mentioned, the textbooks, and starting very, very early. So all the information comes from these very big corporations with their big money and the research and literature and everything that is very carefully controlled goes into the textbooks, into our education systems. And then the publishing companies, it's very, you know, when I still worked in publishing in the early days of launching my books, you realize how there are specifically chosen publishers that publish educational books. And these publishers constantly publish all educational books. You will never be given a publishing job or what's it called, a publishing quota or whatever, to publish some educational books, because that is a very closely guarded group. Again, it's a boys club and part of the fraternity of the control mechanism. And then the important thing, you start the kids as early as possible. Start brainwashing the children as early as possible. Brainwashing them in the content of the textbooks, in how it's presented, how it's taught, how we control the behavior, how we make children do things, follow orders, etc., etc., and break down our natural ability of creativity. The entire school process is a very cleverly disguised propaganda machine and brainwashing manipulation machine to break down the very early creative abilities and creative skills that we have as young children, and replace them with dictatorial fear-mongering, you know, obey your teachers, obey your masters, obey your superiors, obey your leaders, and so forth. And this is This is very important. So this is why they start children out at school so early and start programming us so very early. Take control of the media is one of the key things. Obviously, you are aware of the fact that all the major media and news networks are controlled, and through that, they spew the ongoing, never-ending, brainwashing, repetitive propaganda that they create for us. The developing story. They develop the story, they create the story, they develop the story, and then they turn it into reality. The developing story scenario in the hundreds and thousands of TV channels that are controlled by the international media distribution networks, the platform that distribute the content for all the news networks. And if you want to get really into the details of that, there's a beautiful documentary that was recently released, probably about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, called Monopoly. It's done by a Dutch guy. Find it on the internet, Monopoly. I think it's on my Telegram channel. Yes, if you go to my Telegram channel, I have a link to Monopoly. It is a truly very, very well prepared documentary with all the details that show you how the media thing is controlled. And the most important thing is are the agencies that distribute the content for the news, specifically written, exactly written, word for word. And this is how you often see so many news networks around the world where the newsreaders say exactly the same thing. They repeat exactly the same thing because it all comes from this centralized distribution agency for the content of the news channels. And then the way to lie is a very, very advanced psychological tool, because you have to stick close to the truth, stick as close to the truth as possible, but change the critical facts. So it's really important. So for example, and obviously this is then called fake news. So this is how they report on the bombings or the 9/11 and this is how they report on everything. They're masters of manipulating the narrative to describe what's happening, but change the details so that we reach the wrong conclusion and we believe what they tell us. And this is the spectacular power that the giant media companies have. It's truly astonishing. The bombing and the terrorist events and everything in the mainstream media. And then one of my favorites, obviously, that we're going to deal with is, for example, atoms. The atom versus the structure of the atom. So we all know atoms exist. We actually can see atoms under electron microscope. So we can't lie about atoms, but we can lie about the structure of atoms, because very few people can actually understand what the structure of atom is, or when they show you the pictures or the scans, what the subatomic particles actually look like, or what the nucleus of the atom looks like. So they can lie about that. So this is, again, how they lie. They tell us the truth in the one area, but then fudge the details so that we get the wrong information and reach the wrong conclusions about what's really going on. They use mind control tricks and tools that are not really understood by the public. And this is the other thing, is like people don't understand certain words, certain phrases, certain the way that you answer, the way that you ask questions, the way that you intimidate people. And they train the journalists on these major news networks, go through these schools where they trained to do this. And it's spectacular to what levels these people go. So mind control tricks and tools not understood by the mainstream public. This is a big thing. And then over and over, keep promoting through the media, through the textbooks, through the education system, keep promoting the globalist agenda in every possible subject, in everything imaginable. I consciously put those pictures there to throw the cat among the pigeons about this whole argument about what shape the earth is. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, because it just, at this stage, even, it is too much a sensitive subject. Not everyone is ready to have that discussion. So what you will notice, for example, keep your eyes open to TV shows, Netflix shows, movies, and start paying attention to the placement of globes, the globe Earths in movies. And you'll start seeing an agenda developing here. That hit me probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've been noticing it now. And it's like clockwork. in the most unnecessary places, in every movie and every TV show, in scenes that should not necessarily have a globe earth in it. There's a globe earth standing there. A guy going to the toilet and down the passage is a globe earth standing against the window, and a child in his bedroom and a guy in his office and having a meeting, and there's always globe earths in every shot, and in very specific strategically placed shots. And you start to see that this is not by accident. They're doing this on purpose. Why they're doing this remains a very hot topic and a sensitive subject that we may get to at the end of this entire discussion. So promote the globalist agenda in every subject. And the globalist agenda is not just the shape of the earth. The globalist agenda is technology, healthcare, minerals, industry, corporations, countries, borders, you name it. That's the globalist agenda. Currency, money, obviously, banking, central banking, all these things that they have absolute control over. Always make people believe that they're in control, that they know what's going on, that the rest of the people have no idea what's going on, that we just dumb stooges that have to hang on every word they tell us because they're very smart and only they know how it works. And then finally, in this process, obviously, there are many other things they do. I've just really touched upon a few of the most obvious ones that you probably are aware of, but it's important before we start from the very beginning, as I said up front, before we can start from the very beginning, we had to just remind ourselves of what's going on so that when we come across something that really, really fights with our own belief system, that we are prepared to drop our guard and allow that information in. And it's because it's only then that we start to grow and start to learn new things. And I know I'm an absolute perfect example of that, where, 10 years ago, there were certain things I simply was not prepared to listen to or even enter into my psyche or my area or contemplate as a possibility. And guess what? 10 years later, that big no-no is actually firmly entrenched in my belief system in many different things that previously I could not have imagined I would believe or understand or comprehend or even promote as a possible area of knowledge or truth or wisdom. So finally, the final thing that the global elite's objective is: make life as difficult as possible for as many people as possible. And that is really, for me, that's probably the toughest and the most heartbreaking part of this whole global elite control system, and the dumbing down of the people, the disinformation, the propaganda campaign. While the people are disinformed, naive, ignorant, beautiful souls that are born and live life believing what they're told and just simply believing that the government is their friend looking after them, the government will never do anything that will harm them. And these beautiful, naive souls, naked souls that are just so trustworthy and trusting, just go out there and they just cannot succeed in life. And life is so hard and so difficult, and they just can't understand why life should be so hard. And this is why they have to make life so difficult, because they have to keep people tied up and occupied so they don't have enough time, spare time, to go and do research, to get informed, to get educated, and to become wise, to attain wisdom and break through that global control barrier and the control system that has been imposed on us, and realize what's going on, realize who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, and what has been done to humanity. So this is what they do. And this is why so many people struggle for most of their lives. Think about the statistical probability. And this is a simple scientific physics mathematical argument. Now, if you study statistical probability, like flipping a coin, heads or tails, flipping a coin, heads or tails, ends up more or less 50-50, 49-51, 48-52, 50-50, and it varies all the time, very close to evening out. Statistical probability normally balances things out. Because in nature, keep in mind, we're going to talk about nature, the structure of nature. So the toroidal fields that manifest as a primordial shapes of everything in creation, these beautiful balanced toruses, these toroidal fields that spin this way and from this side and opposite way in this side, and where they meet, they form that beautiful accretion disk, and the accretion disk and the toroidal, this perfectly balanced toroidal field. This is a balanced organism in nature. And this is how everything should work, balanced, 50-50, the yin and the yang, and so forth. The fact that out of 8 billion people in the world, 7 billion people wake up every day and they go to work and they work hard and they do something. They dig trenches, they build cars, they make building materials, they make beds, they do washing, they look after children, we grow food, we bake food, and we do so many different things, make clothes and invent things. So every day, 7 billion people go out there and they do something in the hope that they'll better their life, to invent something, to create, invent new technology and so forth. And out of those 7 billion people, majority of the global population, very few of those people ever attain a happy life and attain happiness, prosperity, and abundance. Most of the people alive today die in poverty, misery, unhappy, disgruntled, confused, and wondering what the hell happened. Why did they have to go through this life and this torture and this misery? And it's this complete imbalance that clearly shows us that this is not part of a natural, balanced, organic, statistical probability outcome. The fact that so few people succeed in attaining their dreams or being able to create this or create that, our natural skills and abilities, clearly shows us that there is a program, some sort of a program that controls all of the goings on in the world that prevent people from ever achieving their dreams, making life as difficult as possible for as many of us as possible. And that brings us to, oh, not yet. And then obviously we need to continue these lies and propaganda and control, not just for a decade or 10 decades or 200 years. We need to continue this for thousands of years, actually. And this is where it becomes really, really mind-blowingly interesting to contemplate the idea that this lie and this control mechanism has been going on for thousands of years, not just for the last few 200 years or 250 years since the Rothschilds took control of the global financial empire or created their financial empire that run the world, but that this financial empire actually has its origins some 4,000 BC, 4,000 years BC, when the first money was introduced to humanity as a tool of control and tool of enslavement. The fact that money did not evolve out of bartering and trading that so many of us have been led to believe, which is a lie, another one of those lies. And the reason they lied to us about money, because they need to make us believe that money is necessary, that without money there would be no progress, that money is the tool for invention or the mother of invention and so forth. So we need to believe that money is necessary in our lives. So when we realize where money comes from and what it really is, that it's a tool of enslavement and we've been using it for thousands of years under control by those who control the supply of money, things change. And we realize that this control mechanism has been going on for much longer than we could possibly imagine. That's a whole nother story that we're going to probably come back to. We're going to circle back to that. So let's carry on. My favorite example of how education is used to confuse us and to control us. There are 3 favorite examples of mine. I call them the 3 holy cows of our education system. And those holy cows are the fact that humans evolved out of apes. These are the things that they teach us at school. That we evolved out of apes, obviously. Nothing can travel faster than light, because that breaks the entire Newtonian physics mechanism that we've been taught at school, and that energy cannot be created. It can only be converted from one form to another. Now, woven into these statements are both lies and truth. So keep in mind again, they skate very, very close to the truth, but they fudge the details in everything about human evolution, about nothing can travel faster than light, and about energy cannot be created, it can only be converted. All 3 of those statements are both false and true. And this is what creates so much confusion. So let's just go through these. First of all, the theory of evolution was introduced into our education system in the 1800s. We're all aware of this. 1800s, and then especially in the early 1900s, when the theory of evolution started in the 1800s with Darwin, but was really introduced in our education system in the 1900s. And then it was a theory, and then suddenly very fiercely enforced. And it's evolution that gets taught at school, not creation. And it's, if you mention creation or intelligent design in any educational position as an educator, a teacher or a lecturer at university, you get fired. Again, watch that documentary, Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, or No Intelligence Wanted. It features Ben Stein. So the theory of evolution suddenly becomes the fact of evolution. And if you don't teach it, you get fired. And if you don't believe it, then you're an atheist, or not an atheist. If you don't believe it, then you just anti-science. You anti-science and you don't believe science. And you should follow the science. And we need to talk about the word science as well. It's really important. So any geneticist that is worth his weight or her weight will tell you that our DNA is a patchwork of DNA. It is a cloned DNA. Our DNA is not an evolved, naturally evolved DNA. There are parts of our DNA that is cut out and placed and moved. And any geneticist that is an independent geneticist that does not work for big pharma or the big genetics labs, that is under secrecy and under non-disclosure, they cannot tell you any of this. But independent geneticists that somehow end up with this, and I've been fortunate enough to have met several of them, about 3 or 4 of these, some of the smartest geneticists in the world. One of them is here in South Africa, one of the most sought after geneticists and stem cell developers in the world, in Johannesburg. They tell you unequivocally that our DNA is a patchwork of DNA. It is a spliced DNA. It's not an evolved DNA. Somebody cloned us, and we know that story from ancient times and ancient texts and ancient scriptures. So if people still tell you that we've evolved, they don't have enough information. So just stop them. Do not be apologetic about this. You can stop them and say, look, you can't have this discussion with me because you don't have enough background knowledge and information. And whatever I'm going to share with you, you will not understand and you will dismiss as hocus pocus. So you can't have these discussions with people that just blatantly spew out evolution because they've been taught this all their life. In all the textbooks, in all of our schooling, that's what we get taught. There's adaptation, but evolution and adaptation are 2 very different things. I do not ever confuse those 2 things, adaptation and evolution. So the second holy cow that I love is the fact that that nothing moves faster than the speed of light. While in 2005 already at the Middle Tennessee State University, a bunch of undergraduates and some high school friends of theirs propelled sound beyond the speed of light, not just once or twice faster, many times faster than the speed of light. This was known as, it was called superluminal propagation. Superluminal, faster than speed of light. Superluminal propagation was realized. It was this result was published in 2007 in the American Institute of Physics, and then they buried that very, very quickly. They really didn't want the schools and the universities to pick up on this and to start teaching this, because this is, keep in mind that the speed of light is the holy cow in physics and science, that, you can't go faster than the speed of light, because then Einstein's theory of relativity and all that stuff falls apart. So, and we're going to come back to that again. Just if I make statements that are a little out of context, we're going to circle back to that. Circle back to that. So let's carry on. So the evolution that we evolved out of apes, absolute nonsense. The fact that nothing moves faster than the speed of light, absolute nonsense. And it's only when we realize that sound is the primordial source of everything. Sound, resonance, and frequency. Resonance, vibration, and frequency that we experience as sound in this reality of ours, on this world, in this world, on this earth, in the air that we breathe. We call it sound, but what it is resonance, vibration, and frequency. So sound is the source of all things that manifests all things in our reality, the seen and the unseen. Only when we come to terms with that will all this start to make sense. And then the third one is that we cannot create or destroy energy. We can just convert it from one to another. And that brings us to the fact, well, where does energy come from? Where does the universe come from? Where does everything come from? Well, we get told it comes from the Big Bang. So how can you say we can't create or destroy energy when all the energy in the known universe comes from the Big Bang? All this energy there was nothing, and then suddenly everything was created and everything just was hurled into existence through the Big Bang. So can you see the truth and the deception in that statement? Yes, it is true that you cannot destroy and create energy, but you first need to define what that is. You can't then say everything comes from the Big Bang and we don't understand what the Big Bang is. So they fudge the whole thing of the Big Bang by saying it comes from the singularity, that infinitely dense, tiny little point, a subatomic particle point from which everything exploded in a moment of creativity and created the universe, and all the mass and all the matter and all the energy comes from that point of singularity. So clearly we've created energy and we've created something. So there is a disturbance of truth here that we need to recognize and realize how, once again, this is used to confuse us and to distort and fudge the detail. And that's really what brings us to starting at the beginning. So now finally, we're going to come to starting at the very beginning. And then the question is, well, the beginning of what? What are we going to start off? The beginning. Is it the origins of humankind? The beginning of life? Creation of our solar system? The creation of the universe? Let's go to the beginning of everything, because that's where the journey becomes really, really interesting. And we've just had a little teaser with the Big Bang and the singularity. So let's start there. Let's start with the Big Bang, because right now, the Big Bang is the theory they teach at school at how the universe came to be. And all NASA scientists, all science institutions and astrophysics institutions talk about the Big Bang as a given fact, as the scientific fact that brought forth the universe and everything in it. It's not questioned. No one's questioning this. And they talk about 14 billion years ago, that there was nothing and nowhere. And this is the definition of the Big Bang, by the way, from space.com. So nearly 14 billion years ago, there was nothing and nowhere. Then, due to a random fluctuation in a completely empty void, a universe exploded into existence. Something the size of a subatomic particle inflated to unimaginably huge size in a fraction of a second, driven apart by negative pressure vacuum energy. Scientists call this theory for the origins of life and origins of the universe the Big Bang. Now, if ever there was something that sounds like science fiction, this sounds something like the greatest science fiction movie ever written. And this remains the mainstream science world's description of the creation of our universe. Just stop and think about this for a second, people. So next time somebody tells you, follow the science, you tell them to shut the hell up. They have no idea what they're talking about, no idea what science is. They don't even know where the word science comes from, what it means, and what a true scientist really is, and who should be called a scientist and who should never be called a scientist, because this kind of statement sounds and reads like the greatest science fiction story ever written. And this is what we teach our kids, and this is what all our astrophysicists and scientists hold on to. And yet, in this fictional story lies an incredible amount of truth, once again, They fudge the detail. They tell you what happened, but they fudge the detail because they don't want you to know the truth. And the moment you're confused about it, it often takes a lot more time to get unconfused than if you knew less or more. So it's better to confuse people than rather not tell them something or tell them everything. So confusion is good for those who want to keep us uninformed. So the Big Bang, the question is, well, what happened next? What happened when the Big Bang happened? How did everything come into existence? Well, the spectacular thing, and this is where the science fiction fairy tale of mainstream astrophysicists and cosmologists continues, this fantastic science fiction story. It is an accident. It is not by design or consciousness. It is purely an accident. So the void was filled with an infinite number of subatomic particles, infinitely small subatomic particles that vibrated and bumped into each other randomly. These random collisions of these infinite number of subatomic particles created everything in the known universe, the seen and the unseen universe. They created the galaxies, the planets, the water, the plants, the animals, the insects, etc., 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 including you and I, and the ability to communicate and reason. So everything in our reality is a consequence of an accidental bumping of random particles bumping into each other, creating everything in the known universe. Now, if you did not know this, hold on to this, because this is critical. This is what they tell us is responsible for everything in the known universe. And they stick to this. They stick to this BS. Clearly, anyone that has studied any little bit of science, biology, especially biology, any kind of biologist that studies the complexity of cells, plant cells, human cells, single-celled organisms are so complex that any biologist should look at this, read this, and go, you got to be on drugs, dude. Anyone that can make this kind of statement is clearly deluded, has got no idea what's going on, and is promoting science fiction as science. So huge, huge problem that we faced with here. The entire universe was created by random particles bumping into each other by accident. So I developed a lovely little story that I do, a little trick, and I start by going like this. And then eventually people say, what are you doing? I say, I'm making a rabbit. What? Yeah, I'm making a rabbit. You know, did you know that the entire universe and everything in creation started with random particles bumping into each other? Subatomic random particles, and eventually created everything: planets, galaxies, animals, insects, and everything else, including rabbits. So by me bumping these particles, not randomly, but consciously, I'm not just bumping particles against each other, I'm bumping conscious cells, subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, molecular structure, cellular structure, and cells that already are made up. So I've jump-started and leapfrogged the creation process by billions of years, and I'm way ahead of the process. So if I just carry on this bumping of particles against each other for another 100 trillion times, a rabbit will appear. A rabbit will magically appear out of this bump. You realize how insane that is. Obviously, if you believe that, then this will create a rhino, this will create an elephant, this will create an octopus, and you can come up with the infinite number of bumping of particles against each other and what kind of creature or galaxy you want to create for yourself by bumping particles into each other.